So I've given various examples to various people before on how to edit a Wikipedia article. So let me do this and do it as a recording so that way it can be used for playback if it might be useful and helpful. So one of the first ways to do this, and there are various approaches to it, the way that I'm taking is you find a high level piece of evidence. In other words, you find a high level journal article or other credible and reliable piece of evidence, which is done objectively, avoids bias, avoids opinions, etc. And you find something which we might call a fact, but it's basically a piece of evidence that has high levels of support. So I'm going to give an example of this article from the journal PLOS Digital Health. It's called Artificial Intelligence Applications Used in the Clinical Response to COVID-19. Okay, now, sounds like a good article. What's really important and what sets this article apart is it is a scoping review. A scoping review is a very high level of research. It's not just an individual study. This looks at a whole bunch of different studies. And when I looked at this article, I read through it and I identified and I highlighted in the article what I thought was the important element of this. I'm just going to make this a little bit larger so you can see it. And in their conclusions, what they're basically saying here is that there were lots of pieces of evidence that artificial intelligence was used during the COVID pandemic, specifically related to the clinical response. In other words, in health. However, what they noticed, and this is the important element that I thought was really important from this review, they said that it is relatively easy to develop and test a new AI application and publish the results. Okay, not rocket science there. It is much harder to deploy that application in clinical practice. The number of machine learning practitioners and journals, together with the availability of data, computing infrastructure, open source, has resulted in a proliferation of academic artists presenting new clinical AI models, including to address COVID-19. However, this is it. Fewer of these applications have been used in clinical practice, and many of those that have been used are not evaluated in the academic literature, which means that there's been a lot of AI that was used during the pandemic to try to understand healthcare and supporting health, et cetera. However, very little AI was actually used in implementing healthcare or providing direct healthcare. That's this little piece right here. However, which always means counter to what's expected, fewer of these applications have been used in clinical practice, and many have not been evaluated in the academic literature. So lots of people did lots of things with AI during the COVID pandemic, but there's very little evidence that any of it was actually implemented to directly help patients in some way. That's basically what it's saying. Great. There's a finding. There's a strong level of a finding here. So what I did is I went into Wikipedia here and I literally typed in, because I don't know what I was looking for. I don't know which article. It's not going to be the article on COVID. That probably wouldn't fit here. Probably not going to be the article on artificial intelligence. This is a really specific use of it. Probably wouldn't fit in either of those. So let me see if I could find something that's a little bit more specific. And I did a search on literally COVID, artificial intelligence. I used the little search box up here. I already did the search just for the point of this recording. So I already did the search and I came across it and I found lots and lots of things that include COVID and artificial intelligence. And the two that looked most promising applications of artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence in healthcare. And sure enough, it's in the artificial intelligence in healthcare article that I think this finding will actually fit. So the next step is now once I find some high-level piece of evidence that I want to edit into an article, then what I do is I look for inside the Wikipedia article, where would it fit? And we want this to fit naturally. We don't want to force it in. We generally don't want to edit up on top. That's called the lead. The things on top generally should only be a high-level summary of what's already in the article. So generally, I don't want to put anything up there. So when I was looking, I ended up in this section here, infectious diseases, because, well, that's what COVID is, but also it actually mentions COVID. It's the only place in the article that COVID is really mentioned. So I looked at this section here, and it says neural networks have been developed to rapidly and accurately detect a host response to COVID-19 from mass spectrometry samples. Okay, great. And then it goes on to other applications, meaning other applications in other health situations. I really think that it should be another sentence right after this. So I'm going to come up here and click edit because I only want to edit that one section. Remember, I'm still showing you what I'm going to be editing, and I've already highlighted the section that I think is important in the journal article or the other high level of evidence. So we said it's going to be right over here. Okay. So I'm actually going to make a little change over here in this sentence because I want to help it to flow. So I'm going to say while, and then we'll just make a neural network. I'm just going to edit that because I want that to be lowercase now. Oops, not there. I'm going to edit it there. Okay, so while, let me just go back one more space. Okay, while neural networks have been developed to rapidly and accurately detect a host response to COVID-19 from mass spectrometry samples, comma, now I'm going to put the new piece of evidence that I have here. I never want to copy and paste it exactly because that's plagiarism. Don't want to do that. Instead, I want to restate the important point in my own words and then cite the source. So while this is the case, okay, a scoping review of the literature found, because this is a scoping review of the literature found few examples of AI being used directly in, and I'm looking at the section right over here. Okay, few applications have been used in clinical practice. Okay, so let me fix my spelling here. Found few examples of AI being used directly in clinical practice during the pandemic. I'm going to say the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic itself. There's my addition. Of course, I now need to cite it. The easiest way to cite is to grab the DOI. I'm using a wonderful program called Zotero. It's used to help me to manage my PDFs and my references. So I'm just going to copy the DOI. I'm going to come right after my sentence, literally right after the period. I'm going to click the cite button. I'm going to paste my DOI. I will generate this. The system is now going to take the DOI and go out and capture all of the reference information. Here it is. There it is right there. Okay. And I'm going to click insert. Okay, there it is. There's nothing right here, so I don't need to do any additional editing. Okay, there it is. There's my change. Now, of course, I do need to save this. So let me come over here and publish my change. And whenever I publish a change in Wikipedia, I always want to write a summary. So added findings from a scoping review, added findings from AI during the COVID-19 pandemic from a scoping review. I could usually leave that blank, and I usually want to watch the page. That way, if somebody comes and reverts it or makes a change or additions, I'll be notified of it. And I'll publish the change. So I published the change. You're going to notice that right up here, here's my change. There's my information. And of course, if I ever want to go and grab the diff, in other words, the diff between what I did and what was there before, I would just come up to view history. My change is the most recent one. It's right on top. So I want to compare the most recent one with the one right before it. I will compare those. And then this URL up here is the diff for what I changed. So I'm hoping that this edit will be helpful. And I'm hoping that the example might be useful, especially if you need to replay it, because this approach that I'm taking will work with most edits. And once again, just as a rule of thumb, for new editors, avoid healthcare topics, avoid politics, avoid controversial topics, avoid those sorts of things because those are highly watched by many people. And if you're just learning, you usually don't know how to really state things really well. That only comes through practice, like everything. So I generally recommend avoiding those kinds of issues, politics, moral or social issues where there's great disagreement, healthcare, and those sorts of things. So I hope you find this useful. Put in any questions down here if you need anything else. Thank you so much.